Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar on the NIHR Global Research Professorships Round 7 webinar. While we're just waiting for people to join, we'll make a start on an overview of the webinar and a little poll to see where people are joining us from today. My name is Hayley Mableson and I'm a Senior Programme Manager at the National Institute for Health Research in the UK in the Global Health team that manages the Global Research Professorships. And I'm joined today by Professor Ibrahim Abubaka, who's the chair of the selection committee for the Global Research Professorships and is based at University College London. And he'll be sharing with us today some insights from the committee. So thank you for joining us today, Ibrahim. Just before we start, we will be recording the webinar today, and so the webinar along with the slides will be made available after the webinar. There is a Q&A button, so please do add your questions to the webinar throughout the presentations, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end where we'll be answering as many questions as possible. If you click like on the questions that have been posed, if you agree with those questions, it will prioritize. It'll help us prioritize answering the question. So rather than repeating a question, if you could do that, then that will help us a little bit as well through the Q&A. There's also the chat function, which if you use this, the team here at the NIHR will be able to help with any issues that you may have in terms of connection or sound issues or anything like that. So please do use that as well. We'll also be sharing relevant links to our web pages or useful pages that we talk about throughout the webinar. So before we begin, we'd just like to know a little bit more about who's joining us today and where you're joining us from. So we'll share a poll, and if you can just enter the country that you're joining us from, that would be really helpful for us to understand a little bit more about our audience as well. So hopefully we've got a good range of people coming from across the UK and countries in which we have eligible institutions, which I will talk a little bit more about. But thanks for joining us today. We do hope that you find the information that we're sharing here useful, in addition to the guidance notes and the documentation that we have available on our website, which hopefully you'll have seen already. Thank you very much for that. So I'll go through then our agenda today. Sorry, just having a sound issue there, but hopefully that's resolved. Sorry about that. Yes, the agenda for today's webinar. So I'll first start off by giving a background and context for the award and a little bit of information about the National Institute for Health Research. And then I'll present some details about the upcoming round, including dates and any changes that have been made to the award. I'll cover the application process as well and provide a bit of guidance on that. And then we'll move on to Ibrahim's slides, in which he'll share the reflections from the selection committee from that chair perspective and give us a bit of insight into what makes a competitive application for that. So the National Institute for Health and Care Research's mission is to improve the health and wealth of the UK through research. Working in partnership with the NHS, universities, local governments and other research funders and the patients and the public. The NIHR funds, enables and delivers world-leading health and social care research that improves people's health and well-being and promotes economic growth. The NIHR invests more than £1 billion a year in research, and this funding goes towards research projects, career development awards, and the people and facilities and technology that enable research to thrive. So the Global Health Research Portfolio of the NIHR is principally funded through Official Development Assistance, or ODA, and this was established in 2016 and has developed at pace since then. We fund high quality health research for the direct and primary benefit of people in low and middle income countries, and strengthen research and development capacity and capability in both the UK and low middle income countries through mutual learning and knowledge exchange. Working closely with the global health community, we commission and invest in applied health research and training that responds to the diverse needs of low and middle income country communities and anticipates the evolving global burden of disease and addresses health system priorities. And more information on our global health research portfolio can be found on the NIHR's website if you're interested in more in that. So the global health research portfolio has 3 strategic pillars between the priorities between 2002 and 25, and where we commission and invest applied health research and training that responds to these diverse needs, as I've said. And these include addressing the shifting global burden of disease, developing health systems to identify and respond to population needs, and building resilience to tackle future global health threats. And this is underpinned by our priority to strengthen research capacity within low and middle income countries and the UK. And our research is driven by the NIHR's principles of impact, excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and effectiveness. So we have a number of global health research programs that we deliver this portfolio through. And these work through a variety of mechanisms. So all research must address an underfunded or under-researched area. And funding, we have researcher-led programs where funding topics are put forward by researchers themselves, for example, our global health research units and groups. And these work in partnership to address knowledge gaps. And we have strategic and thematic funding for research projects in key areas where a strategic and targeted investment may result in can result in transformative impact, such as in non-communicable diseases, health systems, multiple long-term conditions. We also have funding, partnership funding, and our professorships, which are focused on capacity strengthening. So we fund global health research on underfunded or under-researched topics, as I've said, and the professorships awards sit within the Global Health Training and Personal Awards. So on this slide, if you look at the bottom section, the last 2 rows is the portfolio of the team that we sit in, where we manage the professorship awards, and we have what's called the Global Health Research Training Programme, with the aim of which is to build on investment of the NIHR's global health research portfolio and support individuals to pursue academic careers within the NIHR awards. The Global Research Professorship sits alongside this global health research training and is specifically aims to develop research leadership within global health. So an overview of the Global Research Professorships. This scheme runs in tandem with our domestic research professorship scheme, and the Global Profs has been offered since 2018, and since 2022 has had its own Global Health Selection Committee, which highlights the growth of this scheme. The aim of it's our flagship award for the NIHR, and we aim to fund research leaders of the future to promote effective translation of research. And the aim of the award is to provide a step change for researchers to become outstanding research leaders within their field. It's an annual award which opens between September and December each year, and is open to any professional background, be that clinical or non-clinical, and it's open to applicants from the UK or eligible institutions within low and middle income countries. The list of low and middle income countries was updated this year, and there are over 200 institutions on that list. So if you have any queries around that, please do check the list on our website. And I'll go into a bit more detail about what makes an institution eligible in a few slides' time. So the scheme is a 5-year award, which includes salary for the lead applicant, salary for funding support posts, and we do outline a suggested configuration of a 3-year doctoral post, a 3-year postdoc post, and a 5-year postdoc. However, depending on the setting or country that you're working in, you will be able to outline within your application the support that's required to deliver your research, especially as we are expecting you to develop capacity within your research area. We are flexible on this. We just request that you would provide justification for the specific needs that you have. Research, we support research cost contributions. The research proposal will need to be underpinned by ODA principles and have direct benefit to populations within low and middle income countries, as well as operating on the NIHR's operating principles of impact, excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and effectiveness. It should also have a strong community engagement and involvement planned throughout the research cycle. As part of the award, you will have access to the NIHR's leadership programme, which is a prestigious and competitive programme that runs over 12 months. And you'll also have a travel fund, which would fund which supports travel to undertake research, as well as for conferences and training, etc. So this slide shows the titles of the current Global Research Professorships, which just highlights really the range of the wide range of research that's currently ongoing as part of this scheme. As I've mentioned, the award is open to both clinical and non-clinical health researchers, health and care researchers, and applications would be welcomed from a broad range of professional backgrounds, including with public health and social care, including methodologists. We have previously received applications from public health, social care, and non-medically qualified professionals. However, these numbers have been smaller, and we would like to see these increase. And these include, but are not restricted to, economists, statisticians, epidemiologists, methodologists, allied health professionals, anthropologists, bioinformatics, to name a few. So just to give you an idea of the range of applicants that we have previously had. So the current round 7 for 2023, opened on the 20th of September and will close on the 6th of December 2023. So there's a few weeks left to apply this year, and as I've said, it is an annual scheme that we expect to open around the same time next year if you're not in a position to apply this year. There are up to 5 awards will be made available in this 7th round. So who can apply for a Global Research Professorship? You must be an individual with an outstanding record of public health or care research, including clinical and non-clinical researchers, and be on track to become a future global health research leader. You should be close to or have recently been appointed to a professorship level. And we do recognise that career structures and pathways differ in different countries. So we've indicated here examples of the level at which we would expect you would currently be working. But please do get in touch with us if you're unsure and you think you should be eligible. Then reach out to us and we'll be able to discuss specific circumstances with you. As I've said, you can be based in the UK or in a low and middle income country in eligible institutions, but you must be nominated by your host institution. So low and middle income institutions that are eligible are those which have previously been or are currently partners within the NIHR's Global Health Research portfolio. And this includes the units, groups, HPSR and Wright Awards, as well as the Global Health Research Centres and the current Global Research Professorships. So we currently do have a list of over 200 institutions that are eligible. If you believe that your institution should be on the list, as they previously are currently part of an award, and you're not on the list, then please do get in touch with us, and again, we'll be able to discuss specific eligibility. Higher education institutes across the UK may include relevant partner institutions in low and middle income countries in their applications. And a maximum of 2 nominations are permitted per higher education institution or research institution. If an institution is making 2 nominations, then at least one of those should be female. If there's only 1 nomination, then it can be male or female. So the application process for this award is a single stage application via our award management system called Aramis. And specific guidance notes on the application form itself are available on the NIHR's website. And these walk applicants through in detail what the committee is looking for in each section and what you should include in each section of the application form. So finally, from me, a few tips for applicants before I hand over to Ibrahim. We would advise that you register on Aramis as soon as possible, rather than waiting till later within the application period to give you an idea of what the application form looks like and what's required. You should review the guidance notes and ensure you are eligible before starting the application. And make contact with your local finance office and required signatories well in advance of the deadline, because they will be required to input before that deadline comes. Please give full consideration to your community engagement and involvement plan, research capacity strengthening plan, and your plain English summary. And have the application reviewed by peers before you submit. And make sure you do a comprehensive spelling and grammar check. So that's all from me on my slides, and I'll pass over now to Ibrahim. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hayley. So my pleasure to be presenting at this webinar in my position as chair of the Global Professorship panel. I chair a committee which includes 2 deputy chairs and a range of members, and there's representation from around the world on the committee. So not only do we have a balanced disciplinary expertise, but we also have representation from different countries, making it more able to assess appropriately applications. Before I start on the points on this slide, I just want to reiterate the fact that this is NIHR's flagship program, and we're expecting to select research leaders that would be developed, that would use this as a platform to develop into an even better set of researchers and leaders in the space. So for example, the current head of NIHR and the current head of the NIHR Academy are both former research professors, which tells you sort of the level at which NIHR values this scheme. Our committee is a panel of global health and care professionals who provide sound and unbiased decision-making on applications. We review and assess applications and provide recommendations to the Department of Health who have met the criteria that we've set out as to whether they should be funded or not. And then the department can decide to award based on our recommendation. As I mentioned earlier, there are 11 of us on the committee, myself as chair and 2 deputy chairs. Next slide, please. So just briefly as to what we would be looking for in an application. Clearly, we're expecting good quality science, but to succeed in like any grant application system, there are a number of common characteristics that make a good application. So we're looking for applications that where the nominee is likely to make a very good contribution in the long term to translational research, to capacity building, and to research leadership in the selected development assistance country, i.e. lower middle income country in which they are working. So if they're UK based in the country that they've selected to work, and if they are from a lower middle income country in that country in particular. We're looking for a demonstration as to how and why a specific issue or discipline has been identified for research as a priority for that country. So some tailoring of what it is you're doing with the need of that country, and a clear identification that it's an unmet need, i.e. there aren't tons of others doing exactly the same thing, and that you're going to be adding value. You've demonstrated this by discussing with stakeholders, which includes policymakers or health practitioners on the ground through your community engagement and involvement program, and exactly how your research program and the partnerships you developed will address this particular gap you've identified. We're looking for outlines that the projected impact of the program would have on the applicant's career and future trajectory. We want this to be a stepping stone that builds you into that top research leader that is distinguished. Next slide. So starting with the applicants, one of the three triads that make a strong application, obviously, is the applicant. We expect that applicants can be clinical or non-clinical, and we're very, very keen to have non-clinical applicants, in part because, as with many health applications, there is a higher proportion of clinical applicants, and this would include social care, as well as other aspects of translational research and health services research. From as many disciplines that underpin health as possible. But whatever discipline you come from, we expect you to have an outstanding record in public health, in health or social care research. We expect a demonstration of an upward trajectory in your research in the last 5 years to a decade, so that you are on that path to achieving success in your research. And what we are doing is essentially priming you to become that research leader. We expect evidence of your outputs, i.e. publications and reports, etc., and presentations at significant conferences to be clear that you are succeeding, to provide evidence that you're succeeding. We also expect that you have a track record of securing research funding for your program of research work to date. We would expect evidence of relevant and substantive low and middle income country collaboration and partnerships. This applies specifically to UK-based researchers, where they may have largely done a lot of their research here in the UK. So we'd want to see that there's evidence that they're actually engaged in the relevant low and middle income country and are or have established strong collaborations and partnerships on which they're building the professorship on. Next slide. So the second of the three kind of triad that makes a good application is the research plan. And often this is where applicants fail. By and large, the majority of our applicants, the applicant themselves tend to be very strong, because by the time people want to apply at this level, they clearly are on the right trajectory, at the right path of their career. And often what distinguishes good and poor applications is actually the research plan. It's really important that you spend as much time as you can in getting this bit right. So here we're looking at the quality of the proposed program and the likelihood that if successfully delivered, it will achieve the ability to attract additional funding, i.e. you'd win other competitive grants, continue to build your research program. To do this, like any good scientific project, we would expect to see that you have well-defined objectives and that those objectives are likely to lead to answerable results. And to do that, we would expect that the methods you'd use, whether they are quantitative or qualitative, that they are clear and that they are justified. The reasons for why you are selecting those methods are articulated in your application. It often helps to have preliminary data because that demonstrates feasibility, and applications that kind of show that there's a low risk of failure because they have preliminary data are better and easier to convince both reviewers and panel members. I think it's important to urge people not to be overambitious, although because this is our most senior panel in terms of recruiting research fellowships, we expect that we also want to see some level of ambition, right? So pilot studies that are recruiting a handful of individuals in a quantitative study that are not powered to answer the respective research question will not stand a chance, would probably be weeded out before interview. And if you are doing a quantitative study, then you must have your appropriate sample size calculations very clearly outlined to show that you'll be able to answer the question laid out. As alluded to earlier by Hayley, we expect clear writing and avoiding inconsistencies. There's nothing more irritating to panel members than reviewers than a poorly written application where the science is good, because you'll be pulling your hair out thinking, if only this could have gone through, but simply because it's poorly written. So please take as much effort and time in making sure that you don't have typos or very poor writing. If there are challenges in relation to the project or how it will be delivered, it's important to be upfront with that, because if you don't, reviewers or panel members will pick it up. And those would be the weaknesses on which your application would fail. The best way to do this is to state what the challenges are and state how you address them. That way, you kind of anticipate and prepare for any potential weaknesses that the application may have. Ensure that you are addressing an unanswered question with potential for impact. I said that right at the beginning as the reason for the scheme, but you'd be surprised to see how often people fail to do the basics in the introduction, setting out why this is an unanswered question and why it will have impact if it's answered in that particular setting or country that they've selected. We also judge the appropriateness of the resources that are being claimed and whether the total funding represented presents good value for public funds, which NIHR is funded by the taxpayer here in the UK. So we do a value for money analysis of, are you asking reasonable amounts for the work that is being done? The scheme is a very generous scheme in that it funds one salary, freeing you up from other commitments to dedicate a good 5 years of your time for research purposes. And therefore, we'd expect that you would also do the same and identify good value for money for the resources being expended on you. We expect good community engagement and involvement, and that should be documented in your plan. Ideally, this should start well in advance of your fellowship, speaking to all the strategic partners at all levels, your partners at all levels, ensuring that you demonstrate how that engagement has informed the development of your application, the development of the methods, and ultimately how you deliver the program. And then ultimately, we would want to assess that, in fact, you are working in an OECD country and in eligible institutions. Hayley has mentioned that there's a list on the website, and you need to check that if you are from an LMIC setting, that your institution is represented there, and that if it is, the proposal directly and primarily is relevant to the development challenge of that country, and that the proposal's outcome would promote the health and welfare of people living in that country. Thank you. Next one. Next slide. Yeah. The third element of what makes a good application is the training and development plan. Remember, this is a personal fellowship. Although the funding is generous and it's the equivalent of a major program grant, actually, this is still very much about the person. I remember when 20 years ago, when I was beginning my academic career, the Regis professor in Cambridge telling me that the fellowship is that one opportunity that you have when you would have protected time to concentrate on your research in a way that you are not distracted by the usual demands of clinical work or teaching or anything else. So it is about you as the individual. Therefore, you must have in your training and development plan a strong program of mentorship, a strong program that shows that you are supported and that you are able to develop your research portfolio to become the research leader that we expect you to be. That you have a program of training to develop skills, both research skills as well as leadership skills. And often at this stage of your career, would expect your leadership skills to take as much prominence because what we are looking to develop are excellent researchers who are also research leaders. But also at the same time, because you are a senior research leader, we expect that you have an obligation to start at this stage of the career, thinking about how you contribute to strengthening capacity within the country and the discipline that you're working in. We expect that you would outline evidence of input by the collaborating partners. So what I was alluding to earlier about showing evidence that you've engaged with partners, we'd want in this section of the application that you would outline exactly how they have inputted into the content and design of your research programs and how you are doing that equitably. I'm proposing how you continue to do that through the implementation, analysis, reporting, and dissemination of your plan. Next slide. The final bit of the assessment of the application is the host and the host institution. And like any fellowship application, we expect applicants to be embedded in institutions that can support the delivery of the research program in all sorts of ways, including giving people the research time and resources that complements the work they're doing. So we expect that to be outlined in a letter of commitment where the institution very clearly sets out how in the short term, in the medium term, and the long term, they expect that they will supporting and empowering the translation of that research within the institution and locally beyond that institution. We'll be assessing how suitable the proposed partnership between the university that you're based and your main partner organization in the health service locally would help in your development as a research professor. And we expect evidence of the host organization's commitment to creating and maintaining an inclusive and supportive research culture. And this includes their commitment to equality, to diversity and inclusion, and to research integrity. Elements that, if you are not familiar with, it's well worth your while to look at NIHR website to understand what we mean by equality, diversity, and inclusion, and what we mean by research integrity, and so that you are able to articulate those in your application. Next one. Great, so that brings us to the end of my summary of some of the tips from the committee. Back to you, Hayley, so we can move to the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Ibrahim. That's really helpful insight for people as well, I think, to hear from the committee's point of view. So here on this slide, we've just got a few links, which obviously when you get the slides, you'll be able to take you through to the website to find those relevant things. So we'll move on now to the Q&A. So we can see already people have been submitting questions through the through that function. So we'll start with those questions now. So I'll start with the first question that came through, which is, where does a UK researcher require the nomination from, the UK or the host country, and what salary do they require? So your nomination should come from your employing organisation. So if you're based in a UK institution, then it should come from there. The award funds the professor's current salary, and it's expected that the host organisation would then recycle the professor's salary for research and capacity building purposes. The partner institutions in the country in which you'll be conducting the research will be part of the application as a signatory and provide support within the application as well. But the nomination itself would come from the UK institution where you're currently employed. The next question is the award directed to mainly young or established professors? So we would expect you to either have been recently appointed as a professor or be about to become a professor. So if you've been at that level, a professor level, for more than 5 years, then we wouldn't expect for you to be applying for this award. Ibrahim, is there anything that you would like to add to?
Yeah, no, I'll completely agree with that. So if you're an established professor with an established research program for longer than 5 years, then by and large, the committee would see that getting this award is likely to achieve our intention of pushing you to become that research leader.
Great, thanks, Ibrahim. The next question is around the research project. So can the award involve more than one research project? So I would say that they can involve various work packages, but we wouldn't expect to fund completely different research projects. And you may be a slightly different focus for the postdocs, PhDs, etc.
No, I would expect that it will be one coherent research program. Obviously, a coherent research program can have different sub-questions, but it all needs to tie up into a program of research that allow not completely different subjects.
Yeah, that's great. And the next question is, are there any successful exam applications available as samples? Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have examples, as you can appreciate. It's difficult in terms of data protection for previous applicants. But there is, like I say, guidance on the website as to what to include in each section, and hopefully that would support your application. The next question is, can we give an idea of the amount of research costs that that can be asked for, which especially relates to Professor Abubakar's point on recruitment of participants? Can an applicant ask for substantial research costs or focus on data previously collected, for example, with the postdoc staff focusing on analysis of existing data? Ibrahim, do you?
So the general kind of ballpark figure is around £2 million, and I would expect that for a 5-year salary that allows for a full salary of the researcher, the applicant, some staff, as well as project costs. So in fact, this can by and large be a self-standing, fully funded research program. You'd obviously stand a better chance if you already have an established a program grant that is, say, a sizable program on which you are building, because as I said earlier, we're expecting people on a trajectory. And if you happen to be in that position, then the additional 2 million essentially comprimes you to win even bigger grants. And that's really the perfect candidate we're looking for.
That's great. Thanks, Ibrahim. Should the postdoc or PhD staff be affiliated to the same institute as the applicant, or can they be affiliated to a different institution? So they can be at the partner institutions or at your employing institution, whichever suits the research best, really. And it can be mixed as well. You could have posts based at different institutions as part of your award. The next question is around mentoring. So is it mandatory to have a mentor from the UK at the time of application submission? So we would say that mentors can be from the UK or low and middle income countries. We do encourage mentors from low and middle income countries as part of our aim to support research capacity strengthening. Ibrahim, is there anything you would add on mentoring?
No, I agree. You don't have to have a UK mentor, but if you have a UK mentor, then mention that.
Can we clarify what it means by indirect costs will be charged in proportion to the amount of research staff effort requested on the award? So I think that one is to be guided from your host institution. So there'll probably be policies on the way in which they calculate indirect costs in relation to what is being requested. I think if you have specific questions on this, then do get in touch with us via email. We'll share the email address in the chat, but yeah, I think that one's something we can answer in more detail if we know specifics about your question. Is it that any low and middle income country that has never received funding from the NIHR is not eligible? And how can an institution become eligible if they have never been funded by the NIHR? Currently, the current process for eligibility is that it is restricted to institutions that have worked with the NIHR previously, and this is something that if your institution hasn't had affiliation, then at this time you would not be eligible, and this is something that's that is the status of the eligibility criteria currently. But again, if you do have any questions around that, please do get in touch with us and we're happy to answer specific questions. Can we say a little bit more about the NIHR leadership programme? We'll provide a link to the website for this page, but it's a 1-year programme that includes residential and online modules where you'd be training alongside other NIHR researchers. It's a competitive process that you'd have to apply to as an NIHR professor. You would be eligible for our leaders stream of that award, but we will provide the link for you to be able to have a look in more detail. So many low and middle income research institutions have very little by way of core funding. So even established staff are often on project funding, and this would preclude recycling of their salary. Would this be a problem? I think that we
would adapt to the situation, so that we have had instances in the past where exactly that scenario arose, and there are ways around it where we expect in-kind support and not necessarily recycling, as in the case of institutions that are fully funding an applicant.
Would the professorships support neglected areas of research, or just those with a high impact on mortality and morbidity?
Perhaps I should take that one. Assessing the importance of a research topic is one that can be justified in various means, and what you should focus on. Clearly, it's easier to justify a condition or a disease or health area that has a significant effect at the public health level on a population. But legitimately, you could also justify a particular disease or condition because very little research has been done on it. And although it affects a small number of individuals, it's causing untold suffering. So we funded professorships in the general scheme on rare diseases in children. And that's a legitimate form of research to support. And as long as it's a priority, the prioritization is justified within the context of the setting you're working in and the country, and it will benefit its people, then we'll be open to looking at application.
And another one on the research, Ibrahim, does the scheme support qualitative exploratory research?
Absolutely. So that's partly why I was asked when I said it can be clinical or non-clinical, and those non-clinical disciplines might very well be quantitative researchers or qualitative researchers. If you are proposing a qualitative research scheme, again, at this level, we would expect that you are at the top of your game, and you need this to prime you to grow into a research leader in the space, i.e. you're a qualitative researcher that is on a trajectory to become more prominent through this particular resource. But yes, we will, again, not exclude people or include them based on whether they're quantitative or qualitative.
Thanks, Ibrahim. A couple on the kind of funding side. So the ceiling of funding, I think we have mentioned this, the ceiling is £2 million for the award. One for you, Ibrahim, on the committee. So how does the committee assess research income for people from different disciplines? So for non-clinical, for example, this would be lower in financial terms, ready to say clinical trials, etc., which have a high cost.
So the person asking the question won't be surprised to hear that, of course, the committee is acutely aware of this, and that therefore we'll take into account research income. And that's purposely why I didn't mention an amount earlier when I said we would expect the trajectory of both outputs and income. And this question applies to both outputs and income. Somebody in the social sciences might have written a book, and somebody in the some element of applied clinical research or trials would have published papers in high impact papers in certain journals. What we would assess is how relevant it is, and demonstrating leadership and trajectory at that point of your career compared to people in similar disciplines, and not with some global average of leadership or level, both in income and research outputs.
Great, thanks, Ibrahim. Do you always need to have a UK institution on board if one of them is not, if you're not from the UK? No, if you're based in a low middle income country, your partners can be based in the same or a different country. It's not a requirement to have a UK institution on the award. And is it okay not to apply for salary? I think we expect to fund no less than 80% of your salary as part of the award, given that it is personal award.
It almost defeats the whole point of the award if you don't ask for a salary, right? Yeah. This is meant to increase your ability to dedicate all of your time to the research project.
Yeah, I think that leads on to another question that we've got here as well. If you're already funded under a group or a unit, for example, can you apply? But I think, again, as we've said, we would expect this to fund your salary and free you up to focus on gaining those bigger grants.
But in that scenario, what that does is frees up the funding in the unit or group for the unit or group leader to identify the resources to do the work, and therefore complementing and increasing your research capacity locally.
No, definitely. Yeah, I think it highlights that, doesn't it? I think Yes, so another question is, if you've been if you're unsuccessful in this current call, are you allowed to apply in subsequent calls? Yes, definitely. We do ask as part of the application if you have applied, if you've applied previously or to ourselves at the NIHR or to other funders, and just ask if there have been any changes made, but you are able to apply again. Again, we've had a similar question, but can the primary institution be in the low and middle income country and the partner in the UK? Yes, definitely. As I said, there's no requirement to have a UK institution, but they could be the partner if that's the most appropriate setup. So does the selection process recognise that bigger size of a grant does not necessarily equate to the higher quality or significance, and that the number of grants can realistically be different across different disciplines, so that CVs may look quite different for people from a different discipline, particularly a non-clinical social scientist?
So this is the same question that I've addressed before. We would obviously recognize that size of grants and types of outputs differ by discipline, and people will be assessed appropriately, which is the reason why I stayed clear of mentioning an amount or number of publications or type of publications, precisely because we vary the assessment, and we want people from the social sciences to apply and know that you'll be treated fairly, because we're looking for more applications beyond traditional medical science. Maybe Hayley, I can answer that one about what if no preliminary data exists. I think it's absolutely fine to apply without preliminary data. I mentioned it as one thing that could add to the realistic feasibility of your research, that if you have preliminary data, it's more believable that the work is doable.
No, that's great. Thanks, Ibrahim. We've got a few around letters of support and on the partnerships. So the letters of support from the partnerships, I think around, do they need to be fully sealed, they've said, at the time of application, but I think through contracting we would expect collaboration agreements to be in place, but you don't need to have those in place at the application process. Letters of support would be adequate for the application. And then I've got a question here around the nomination process, Ibrahim. So if only one applicant, if male, can be put forward, it puts applicants in the top UK universities at a disadvantage, as the higher internal competition will be much higher than at low-ranked universities. What's the reasoning? So a less prolific candidate from a lower-ranking university would more easily get in. What is the reasoning behind one per person in the NIHR professorships, as this is not used in other NIHR fellowships?
So I think this is an NIHR question.
So I think we allow two applications, up to two applications, and if there are two, in which case at least one of those would be female. And this is to try and level the playing field and ensure equity between male and female candidates. It doesn't necessarily mean that those from, as you say, lower ranking institutions would more easily get in, because there is a threshold for the quality of the research and the quality of the applicants that's obviously being judged by the committees, which is a fair and a process that we follow. So I think it is just to, like I say, to level the playing field really, but it wouldn't indicate then who would be more likely to be funded. We've only got time for a couple more questions. Are there any, Ibrahim, that you think particularly you would like to draw on?
Just scrolling through.
I think is probably useful to answer, in terms of, if the host is in the UK, can the partner institution in the low and middle income country not be an eligible institution on your list? Yes, definitely. At this point, the eligibility is around organisations that we would be channeling the funding to directly, not the downstream partners. So you can partner with another institution that's not on the list, and that then in the future may mean that they become an eligible institution for future applicants to apply as well.
There's one about whether someone needs to give up PI roles and other grants, and the answer to that is we do not expect you to give up PI roles and other grants, but rather your salary element from those other grants, if they're taking a proportion of time, to be freed up as a consequence of winning this grant, so that you can dedicate all of your time to research. But we'll definitely be keen and supportive of you keeping your other PI roles, and indeed to win more grants while you hold the fellowship. So that's seen as a positive.
And I want here again, I think it's important to answer that given that applicants can come from low and middle income countries or the UK applicants might be at an advantage compared to those from low and middle income countries. Does the committee give due consideration to this when assessing candidates? I think, I mean, Ibrahim, I'll hand over to you, but I do think that we as the NIHR and the committee do take into consideration the circumstances in which people's careers have taken place, and I think that is considered, you know, based on the country that people are applying from. But from the selection committee's perspective, Ibrahim.
So I mentioned earlier that we have a very international committee that is multidisciplinary, and therefore, and individuals who have worked in global health research across the global south and the global north, institutions either based in the global north and working in the global south, or based in the global south on the committee. And we therefore will take into account an understanding of the context within which people are working. Clearly, whoever applies, wherever they're based, we expect that to be a top researcher on a trajectory to be research leaders. But we would take into account the different contexts and resources available to do research.
And how much time should the UK, if they're a UK-based applicant, spend in the partner country? There isn't a set guidance on this. It's obviously in terms of the research that's required. But in terms of the committee reviewing that, Ibrahim, would you have
you'd expect to see more than token presence. So you'd expect to see that they're committed to improving and changing the lives of the people in the country, and that therefore they're spending the time needed to actually deliver on the research, including the trajectory to impact, rather than just visiting occasionally. So we would frown at parachute researching and expect substantive engagement at within the LMIC setting. Beyond that, we don't set a time frame because I think it's not really reasonable. It will differ by the different type of research and the nature of the partnership you have on the ground, as to how much time you have exactly on the ground.
I think for our current professor awards, we have some that are based out in the countries full time, some travel regularly and spend chunks of their time. So it's to get, like I say, what works for the research and what's required to implement that. In terms of the success rate, the published results from round 5, we received 29 applications and funded 4. We don't have more data to hand, but we can, again, we're happy to provide more information if you want specifics.
Subsequent years would be published, but I can tell you that compared to most senior fellowship schemes at this level that I've been part of both in the UK and internationally, our success rates are very good, and this is a scheme worthwhile trying if you're at this stage of your career.
Yeah, no problem. And we'll put into the chat now the email address for any queries or further clarifications, but it is academy-awards@nihr.ac.uk, but we will put that into the chat now. Yeah, I think that's probably all the questions that we have time for today. But thank you so much for all of those questions. They are really, really useful to help us expand a little bit on the award and the finer details of it. But like I say, if you do have any questions around eligibility or the application process, then please do get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to help answer any queries that you may have. But yes, thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much, Ibrahim, for your insight. I think it's been invaluable for people to hear from yourself and hear that insight from the committee. But if you are planning to apply this year or in future years, best of luck. Yeah, and we'll hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you and goodbye.